Hey guys, and welcome back to DarkLogic Studios' Attack on Titan theories and discussions. Before we go any further, I want to give you fair warning that these videos are going to contain lots and lots of spoilers. So if you're not caught up with the manga, then what are you doing with your life? Seriously though, if you don't want spoilers, you should probably click on something else. If you're all caught up though, then let's get to it. Hey guys, welcome back. Finally, part 4 of my Chapter 86 review is here. Sorry for the wait. As you can probably hear from my voice, I'm still kind of sick. I've been battling the flu for the past week and a half. Between that and questioning my reality, it's been hard to focus. Thankfully, I recorded most of this before I got sick, so I'm not going to sound like this through the whole video. And 2, I take back what I said about the Reese family being the most confusing thing in Attack on Titan, because it's not. What we're about to talk about right now, this is the most confusing thing in Attack on Titan. Yeah, okay. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's talk about Ymir. Alright, it's time to talk about the grandmummy of all these mysteries, or at least she's old enough to be everybody's grandmummy. Ymir. What is the deal with Ymir? Who is she? What are her secrets? Where did she come from? And what is her connection to the Ymir in the Marleyan storybooks? Well, you guys know the drill by now. So, what do we know about Ymir for certain? Well, she was a member of the 104th Cadets. She's always hanging around with Historia, and we don't see a lot of her in the first 2 arcs. We see a few interactions with our main and supporting characters. And in these first few interactions, Ymir, at first, she comes off as this kind of heartless person. She's kind of rude, and she doesn't really have any regard for anybody else or anybody else's feelings, or at least it doesn't seem that way. She's really blunt, and she just kind of speaks her mind no matter how harsh it may be. So at first she just kind of seems like a jerk, but of course it goes deeper than that, because what we also see of Ymir is that she does actually seem to be pretty selfless. Despite how she talks, there's several times when she goes out of her way for somebody else. So why is that? Because what's interesting is, even though when she's kind of being an asshole, she does seem to like to kind of psychoanalyze people. Like, she's always saying things to get under people's skin and kind of figure out what their deal is, and she just says it to them. But it's kind of more like, not so much in like just being mean, as in kind of trying to force people to see the truth, force people to face things that they don't want to face, which is interesting. You know, she points out Historia, her martyr syndrome. She points out Reiner's dual personality complex. And even Sasha, she's like, tries to cover up her accent and tells her she shouldn't try to pretend to be somebody she's not and stuff like that. And she's always like analyzing people and taking what she finds and throwing it back in their face and being like, this is what you are. And she's like, haha, I got you figured out. You deal with your shit. So that's kind of interesting about Ymir, because she almost seems to have a sort of wisdom beyond her years. And even though she's kind of mean about it, it's kind of like, almost like tough love, like she's doing it for their own good. She wants people to face reality. She doesn't like people being fake or living under a lie. Like, she wants people to face the truth and own who they are and be proud of who they are, and which is actually part of why I really like Ymir. And I think that deep down, the reason she's doing it is because she does care, and she wants people to fucking, like, she's always berating people about being themselves and being proud of who they are, and not trying to pretend to be something else to make other people happy. And you know, the way she talks about it, it's like, you know, she's been there before. she's been in that position. The question is what happened to her to make her so passionate about this. But she definitely seems to care about other people. And we can see this just by her facial expressions, like, for example, when Connie's talking about his hometown while they're at Castle Utgard, and she does look like she actually feels bad for Connie. And then, of course, later on, when we find out that Ymir is a Titan, the only reason she reveals this secret of hers is because it's the only way she can save her friends. And Historia even calls her out on this while she's down there fighting. She's like, wait a minute, you're Ymir, you're like the most awful person ever. Like, why are you fighting for other people? You're supposed to be selfish. like, what's the deal? Just tear down this tower, you know, kind of throwing back on her stuff that she said to Historia in the past. And then, you know, after that, while they're all fighting, when Commander Erwin is about to get toppled by a Titan, she acts like she's gonna attack Erwin at first, and she's all pissed off at him, like, yo, this is all your fault that things got screwed up. But she ends up smacking the Titan away and saving him, and then she also, after that, chooses to go back instead of leaving with the Survey Corps and save Reiner and Bertolt from being devoured by the horde of Titans. Even though she knew going back with him may or may not be a good idea for her, may lead to her dying. But through all this, her whole goal is to save Historia, and at first she had sought out Historia after hearing a conversation while she was living on the street, but ended up falling in love with Historia, and we know they are a couple because it's been confirmed that they are a couple. So she's been going all these lengths for her, and at the same time claiming it's just for herself. And that was probably true at first, but in reality she wants to save Historia more than she wants to save herself. And the only reason she left Historia behind is because she found out that Eren has the coordinate. And I guess we can say, in fact, that Eren does have the coordinate, because when he punches the Titan and we see that shock go throughout the shifters, this power somehow affected them in some way and they felt it, then she's like, oh, that's why they want Eren so bad. So she's knowledgeable enough to know that whatever Eren did meant he had the coordinate. But what's interesting is a bit earlier when Reiner, Bertolt, Ymir, and Eren were in the trees having their little powwow, Reiner actually looks at Eren, and he's talking to Bertolt, and he says, if Eren is not the coordinate we're looking for, then this is going to go on for much longer. Which is interesting that he would even say that, because I had been talking about it in the previous video. What if the power Eren has really isn't the coordinate? But I don't know, but that's how Isayama keeps us guessing, I guess. So, but anyway, I digress. So let's go back to Castle Utgard. Now we can't talk about Castle Utgard without talking about the infamous can of herring. Now obviously what's interesting about this can is the fact that it has these mysterious characters on it. And apparently the only person who can read them is Ymir. Now, it can't be a language used by the Marleyans or the Eldians, because if it were, then Reiner would know it. But he has no idea what it is. He can't read it at all. So what does that mean? When they first get to the castle, it is noted that what they assume are bandits left these crates behind, and that's where this can came from, I assume. So who was staying in that castle? Was it really bandits? I highly doubt that. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm surprised that they didn't, look through this stuff with these mysterious writing on it, I guess they were kind of in a life or death situation, and they were basically just waiting to potentially get eaten by Titans, but still, aren't they curious? Come on. I don't know. But anyway, all we have is this one can, so... But what this must mean is that this can, these supplies, and whoever was staying in this castle is from somewhere on the outside, someone who's not part of the Marleyans or the Eldians. And of course we know there are other cultures and other societies outside of these two because of the Ackermans and the Asians, so maybe this is from one of their clans, or somewhere else in the world, and they're involved in this somehow. I don't know. But it's interesting, because it seems like this must be from some third party. And whoever that is, Ymir must have been part of that. And Ymir does have a bit of a darker skin complexion, than the majority of the other characters in this story. And, you know, at first you could say it was just like a stylistic choice, but now that we have all this talk about race and genocide and all this shit, then that is kind of relevant, because that could be a clue that she is part of an outside culture. She's not necessarily a Marley or an Eldian. Maybe she's an Ackerman, or maybe she's part of the Asian clans, I don't know. But anyway, the second possibility for the can of herring is that it is some kind of coded language, perhaps even an ancient language brought back to be used as a coded language for some covert operations, which would make sense. If they were hanging around inside the walls, they must be up to something. What are they up to? The mystery of the can of herring continues. Now, all that being said, I'm not sure if it would make a lot of sense if Ymir was of the Asians or the Ackermans, because of this connection with Ymir Fritz, who is apparently the person who originally brought the Titans into existence. The one thing, too, that we have to address is what happened in Isla's journal. If you remember, if you saw the OVA or read the side story, in Isla's journal, Isla, in her notebook, describes her encounter with a Titan as the encounter is happening. And she accounts that the Titan actually spoke to her words of meaning. And this is the first time we ever saw, I think, that the Titans could speak. And when this Titan spoke to her, it said Ymir-sama. So this Titan mistook Isla for Ymir and bowed and said Lady Ymir in reverence to her. So what exactly does that mean? It definitely suggests that quote-unquote mindless Titans do have some level of consciousness behind their apparent mindless nature, because when this Titan saw her and recognized her as someone that they held in high regard, it stopped and it spoke, and it tried to suppress its urge, and that's why it went all crazy and started tearing its face off, because it was trying really hard not to eat her, but couldn't control itself, which Isla was kind of stupid. Like, screaming at the Titan, really? Like, come on, control yourself. She probably could have gotten out of there if she wasn't being such a bitch, but anyway. And we also see this a little bit when we first see Zeke during his encounter with Mike, and he tells that ugly little cone-headed Titan thing to stop, and it stops for a second, but then it starts trying to eat Mike again, and he's like, hey, didn't I tell you to stop? And then he just squishes his head. And also we've got that moment when Connie's mom speaks to him as a Titan and says, welcome home. But that's interesting to note that the mindless Titans apparently aren't quite as mindless as they may seem. So, and when Ymir describes her experience of wandering around as a mindless Titan, she says it was like being in an endless nightmare. So imagine what that must be like. But why and how did this Titan recognize Ymir? And who was this Titan to begin with? Someone had suggested in the comments of a previous video that the Titan could be the guy who first recruited Grisha to the revival movement, and it does kind of look like him. And given what we've seen, there's definitely a chance that it was him, and if not, could be very likely a member of this revival movement. So we don't know exactly what all the revivalists knew about Ymir, or whether they actually had like a description, like a physical description of her, or like an artistic representation that they could reference from. So could that be why he recognized her? Or does it have nothing to do with what he knew before he became a Titan? What if it's just the fact that he is a Titan, since we know that Titans, at least shifters in certain circumstances, seem to have these memory inheriting abilities. Who's to say that the mindless Titans don't have some level of this as well, and that the Titans, no matter where that Titan came from, are kind of ingrained. They were created by Ymir, so perhaps maybe they just instinctually know who their creator is. and recognize that person or anybody who might look like that person as them. Now, we get into some Norse mythology. Oh boy. So, now, I don't really know a lot about Norse mythology, so I had to do a little research, but if any of you out there are well versed in Norse mythology and have your own thoughts about this, please feel free to share and enlighten us all with your knowledge, because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But I don't want to just throw out my interpretation. I'm gonna read some of these excerpts from Wikipedia so you guys can come up with your own interpretation, and then I'll talk about what I thought. There is a poetic Edda and a prose Edda, and I'm going to read from the prose Edda section. And I'm going to just tell you right now, there's a lot of words that I am going to pronounce super funky, and I apologize for that, but I want you guys to know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to try, but I'm going to sound hilarious, okay? So, just keep that in mind. Okay, so Ymir is mentioned in 2 books of the prose Edda, Gylfaginning and Skadiska Parmal. Ymir is first mentioned in chapter 5 of the Prior, in which High, Just as High, and Third tell Gengleri, the disguised mythical king Gylfi, about how all things came to be. The trio explained that the first world to exist was Muspel, a glowing, fiery southern region consisting of flames, uninhabitable by non-natives. After many ages, Niflheimer was made, and within it lies a spring, Velgamir, from which flows 11 rivers. Just as High adds that the northern part of Ginnungagap was heavy with ice and rime, and vapor and wind came inward from this, yet the southern part of Ginnungagap was clear on account of the sparks and molten flecks flying from Muspel. Third assesses that, just as from Niflheim there was coldness and all things grim, so what was facing close to Muspel was hot and bright, but Ginnungagap was as mild as a windless sky. Third adds that when the rime and hot air melt, it thawed and dripped. This liquid fell into the shape of a man, and so he was named Ymir, and known among the Jotnar as Arugimir, all of which descended from him. Gengleri asks how generations grew from Ymir, how other beings came into existence, and if Ymir was considered a god. High says that Ymir was by no means considered a god, and says that he was evil as was all his descendants. High explains that Ymir is the ancestor of all Jotnar, and that it is said that when Ymir slept, he sweated, and from his left arm and right arm grew a male and a female, and his left leg produced a son with his right leg, and from them came generations. Gengleri asks where Ymir lived and what sustained him. High explains that the Drips next produced a cow named Alduma. From her teats flowed 4 rivers of milk, and from it fed Ymir. Gengleri asks what the cow fed from, and High responds that the cow licked salty rhinestones. The first day, Adumbla licked the rhinestones. It uncovered that evening the hair of a man. The second day, it uncovered his head. The third day, a man was uncovered from the ice. This man was named Buri, and was large, powerful, and beautiful to behold. Buri married Jutun, Besla, and the daughter of Bulporn. The 2 had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. High adds that Odin and his brothers must be rulers of heaven and earth. It is our opinion that this must be what he is called. This is the name of the one who is the greatest and most glorious that we know, and you would well to agree to call him that too. High relates that Odin, Vili, and Ve killed Ymir, and his body produced so much blood from his wounds that within it drowned all the Jutar but 2. Bergelmir, on a Luther with his unnamed wife, survived and repopulated the Jotar. Gengleri asks what, if High, Just as High, and Third believe the trio to be gods, what the 3 did then. High says that the trio took the body into the middle of Ginnungagap, and from his flesh fashioned the earth, from his blood the sea and lakes, from his bones rocks. Just as High adds that from his gushing wounds they created the sea that surrounds the earth. Third says that the trio took his skull and placed it above the earth, and from it made the sky. The trio took the molten particles and sparks that flew from Muspel, and they fixed all the lights. some in the sky, some moved in a wandering course beneath the sky, but they appointed them positions and ordained their courses. Gangleri comments that what he has just heard is remarkable, as the construction is both immense and made with great skill, and asks how the earth was arranged. Hai replies that the world is circular, and around it lies the depths of the sea. Along the shore the gods gave land to the Jotnar. However, on the inner side of the earth they made a fortification against the hostility of the Jotnar, out of Ymir's eyelashes. This fortification they called Midgard. Further, they took Ymir's brains and threw them skyward, and from them made clouds. So according to Norse mythology, Ymir was the first being that ever came into existence from the elements, and from him descended the race of giants. And it talks about how when Ymir died, his body was used to create the world. And it doesn't say this here, but in another source, which I will also link in the description, it says Ymir's body was then used to create the 9 worlds in Norse mythology. So, and in Attack on Titan, Ymir, when she died, it says that her soul was split into 9 titans, creating the 9 titan clans. And the 9 worlds in Norse mythology are Niflheim, the world of fog and mist, Muspelheim, the land of fire, Asgard, home of the gods, Midgard, home of the humans, Jotunheim, home of the giants, Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods, Alfheim, home of the light elves, Svartalheim, home of the dwarves, and Helheim, home of the dishonorable dead. So, and what's also interesting is when they talk about the creation of Midgard. Now remember this was back before we knew that the Earth was round and that there were planets and stuff. So their idea of Earth is a mass of land surrounded by the sea, surrounded by the ocean. And it says that the shores of this land belong to the giants, but the innermost part of the land, the gods made a fortification against the Jotnar. Now that sounds familiar, doesn't it? And another thing I want to touch on real quick is Castle Utgard. Utgard in Norse mythology, literally meaning outyards, surrounded a stronghold of the giants. They are associated with Utgarda Loki, a great and devious giant featured in one of the myths concerning Thor and the other Loki, who compete in rigid competitions held in the outyards. These outdoor arenas contrast with the putrid indoor cave where Utgarda Loki is said to dwell, when chained in the Gesta Danorum. In another version of Norse mythology, Utgard is thought to be the final of the 3 worlds, connected to Yggdrasil, being the home of the demons, the other 2 being Asgard and Midgard. So that last sentence there is especially interesting because it's basically saying that Utgard is the land of demons. It's hell basically, because you got Asgard, which is home of the gods, Midgard, home of the humans, and then Utgard, home of the demons. So Utgard Castle is literally called Hell Castle. So that's interesting. So yeah, so we've got a bunch of interesting little tidbits there. Definitely, looking back now, definitely was a lot of clues in there based on what we saw this chapter. But I'm not sure if there's any more clues we can derive from this moving forward from here. But it's interesting to go back and look at these little clues and kind of check out where Isayama got some of his inspiration. So that's kind of cool. Another thing that I found interesting about this story of Ymir is that it is stated that Ymir is not a god, that Ymir is in fact evil in this story. So that's interesting. Does that mean that Ymir in Attack on Titan is evil? That the original Ymir is evil? Really evil? Like actually evil? I really hesitate to say anything is that black and white in Attack on Titan because, I mean, as I've been saying over and over again, if you've been watching my videos, you know this. There is no black and white in this story, and everything is in a gray area. So is Ymir Fritz the same Ymir we know? I think it's safe to say that they have to be connected somehow. I mean, Isayama wouldn't just give them the same name for the lulz. It has to have some significance, so there has to be a connection. So what is it? If she is in fact the same Ymir, How could that even be possible? After all, it says in the story that Ymir died. She died almost 2,000 years ago, and her soul was split up into 9 pieces or some shit. And, so she's dead. Her soul isn't even in one piece. So, how could she still exist anymore? How could it be the same Ymir? I have a couple ideas. One of them is that, and this goes a little bit back to what we were discussing in a previous video about Berdolt and Armin, and whether Armin could be, in a sense, possessed or influenced by Berdolt, much like Freda and Yuri seem to be possessed by the first king. We do seem to have this narrative where it is suggested that the consciousness of previous shifters live on inside their successors. Now, according to the story, Ymir Fritz, when she died, her soul split into 9 titans. What if one of these pieces held Ymir's consciousness? What if the person we see as Ymir and Ymir herself are 2 completely different people? What if the Ymir that ate Marcel was a completely different person, and the Ymir that we actually know, when Marcel or Beric, whatever his name is, was eaten, Ymir Fritz's consciousness was transferred over into the body of this young woman, whoever she might be, and took her over. Now, I admit this theory may be a bit far-fetched. We haven't seen anyone be fully taken over by the consciousness of previous shifters before. We've seen their demeanor change, and like with the first king and such, but Freda and Yuri, they still seem to retain a sense of self. Though, as Historia describes, Freda kind of almost seemed to have kind of a split personality, which may even play to Reiner's split personality problem. Who knows? Nah, he's probably just he probably just needs a therapist. But still, we don't know what kind of influence regular shifters who are not inheriting the first king's will have on their successors. But it must have some effect, because we do see this image in chapter 85 of Armin and Berdolt. It's this very ominous image, which we don't know what it means yet, but there's definitely something going on there. So, then again, if it is the original Ymir Fritz, we don't really know what exactly she's capable of. If she was able to make these 9 titans and all these titans and do all this shit, so maybe she would be capable of possessing someone with just that one piece of her soul. But then again, why wasn't Marcel taken over? Why wasn't Marcel running around calling himself Ymir and saying all this, spouting all this stuff about self-pride and whatever? So, probably not the case, but I'm just gonna throw that out there. Also, you'd think that if she was going to possess any Titan shifter, it would be the Coordinate, but, you know, whatever. Another possibility, again, maybe far-fetched, but this is one of the only other things I could think of. So, second possibility is that Ymir actually is, in fact, the devil. Now, I don't mean that literally, but as we discussed in the previous video, the resemblance of Ymir to the creature in the storybooks, in both storybooks, is something that we can't overlook. Now, I mean, you've got a person that shares Ymir's name, that's her first name, and then you've got a creature that shares Ymir's Titan's appearance. So what does this mean? Maybe Ymir did not get her power from the devil. Maybe Ymir herself is in fact this devil-like creature that we see in the storybook. How would that even work? Well, it's hard to say because there's not a lot of information, but I guess it kind of depends on what your theory is, what you think the Titans actually came from. If you think it was something paranormal, like the devil, or if you think it was something man-made, something created by science. We don't know for certain yet. I'm gonna say science, like I said in the last video. I think the Titans were probably created from some kind of experiment or something. I don't know. It's hard to say because, I mean, Titans are impossible, obviously, in real life. They're not scientifically viable living organisms. But that's the beauty of science fiction. But it's hard to tell. It's hard to say how they were created. That's gonna have to be up to Isayama's imagination. So with all this information, all this stuff we have to digest, how do we connect the dots? How do we put this puzzle together? I don't know about you guys, but I kind of feel like I'm trying to put a puzzle together that's actually made of like bits of like 2 or 3 different puzzles, and it's flipped upside down. Cause like, we have all these really seemingly random clues that don't seem to connect to each other and really kind of seem to contradict each other. Ymir herself, we have to assume there's a connection between her and the person in the storybook. There has to be something there. And again, the fact that she looks similar to this devil creature, but it's like, how could she be the same person? Is she Ymir? We don't even really know how old she is. Is she, she's supposed to be 15 or 16 or 17, something like that? Or wait, then she's actually 60 years older. She's actually in her 70s because she's been wandering around as a Titan for 60 years. And then what? Oh, she's 1800 years old? That's pretty old. Like, I don't know how to put this together. I'm really at a loss. We don't even know what all of this is, like, really just mythology. A lot of what we're going by from these Marleyan storybooks, it could be total fiction, a complete fabrication. So I'm sure if we're going by how I believe Isayama prefers to write his story, which by analyzing it and looking at the characters and the situations, even though it has fantastical elements, it does kind of ground itself in a very human reality. And a lot of that is simply his skill at humanizing and getting the audience to empathize with characters, even if they may be seemingly horrible people, and grounding itself in ways of mirroring our own reality back at us. And quite frankly, Attack on Titan is more relevant than ever, considering recent events. But anyway, I'm getting off track. But yeah, if we are going to try and stay on this narrative, keep on this level of groundedness and realism, then there is going to have to be some kind of practical, real-world explanation for where Ymir came from and where the Titans came from. I don't know. Anyway, it's fun to speculate. This whole video has just been wild speculation. I'm not sure what I think is actually gonna happen. I've just been throwing out ideas, so I don't know. You guys tell me what you think. This has been insane. Oh man. So, thanks for watching part 4, the final part of my Chapter 86 review and discussion. We made it. I made it. Dang, this was tough. But it was fun. Alright. For more videos like this, make sure to subscribe, give it a like, give it a share, add it to your faves, all that good stuff. And tell me your thoughts on Ymir and all this nonsense. Make sense of it for me, please. Somebody help. My brain, it hurts. Come follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and I'll see you next time. Peace.